India was creamed off and taken off to Britain. And Britain had 3 or 4% of the world GDP when they conquered India. When they left India, Britain had 22 or 23% of world GDP, and India was left with 3 to 4% of the world GDP. So, you know, they robbed the country. It's exactly what the ruling elites of the developing world are doing right now. They are siphoning off the money, and they end up and unfortunately, the powerful countries, rich countries, don't do anything to stop this plunder.
You're speaking about the rule of law in Pakistan. Of course, the West prides itself on our rule of law. But I was thinking about how the idea of rule of law predates the West. You know, you find it in Roman law and Christianity and Islam. That it's not some idea that's sort of foreign to Islamic countries. It's actually something that is at the source of that.
Look, Jeremy, in the Islamic tradition, there were over 140,000 messengers of God sent to mankind over thousands of years. And every messenger of God, the common message was justice. One of our great scholars, Ibn Khaldun, you know, he was considered the father of modern history. According to him, he said that my whole study of Islam brings me to just one point, that the whole purpose of the Almighty sending man to earth is to establish justice. So whenever during human history, the societies that had a better justice system always prospered. So it is connected to prosperity. So justice brings you rights. Rights gives you freedom, and free and stable societies then become prosperous. So hence, if you look at the table of rule of law index, out of the 140 countries, the top 15 countries which have the best rule of law are the most prosperous. And the bottom 15 countries which do not have rule of law are the poorest. So it is directly connected to prosperity.
Hamza, can I jump in for short questions, because then I have to leave because I'm going on a house search and I've got an appointment. Hamza, I'm surprised also that the way the media has been treated, the way Shaheed Arshad Sharif has been murdered. Imran Khan is missing now for 65 days. Look at Sabir Shakar, myself, Shaheen Sabai, Wajahat Saeed, you all have been registered FIRs for terrorism. Yet the impression of the Western media is, and I think also Jeremy should comment on it, is somehow or the other that you were also as harsh to media. Not a single journalist was arrested in your time. There were no FIRs against the journalists. The journalists were not abducted and detained under your government. Neither are you able to explain that situation, nor is anyone understanding the word. There is a sea difference. Look at myself, look at Sabir Shakar, look at Shaheen Sabai, look at Wajahat Saeed, look at the poor Ashfaq Sharif, look at his family, look at Imran Riaz. Yet they're blaming you for cracking down on media. I mean, how do you explain that?
Well, I think, you know, Moeed, there's a term called moral equivalence, where they equate two unequal situations and actually protect the real aggressor. So, you know, this idea that, you know, some journalists might have suffered during our time, 3.5 years, and because of that, then the whole crackdown, I mean, what crackdown? Media is totally muzzled today. I mean, the media is totally controlled. There is no freedom. Under General Musharraf, and I don't know whether you remember, General Musharraf, the media was liberal compared to what is going on right now. So
100%.
It is completely controlled today. I mean, not just that the 4 of you have left the country, not just that Ashfaq Sharif was murdered after having to, because of threats to his life after leaving. I mean, what about the 4 or 5 senior journalists who were roughed up and beaten up in Pakistan? I mean, senior journalists like Azamir, like Sami Ibrahim, like Ghulam Hussain. I mean, these guys were just roughed up within Pakistan and threatened. So, I mean, this is unprecedented what is going on, the sort of crackdown. And yes, you're absolutely right. Sometimes they bring out some sort of human rights watch or some report or some international journalism who might have mentioned few journalists got a raw deal. But by the way, I looked at all there were 10 cases, so I actually had it investigated. There are 10 cases. And all of them, there were 3 of them which has to do with security, where the military establishment directly spoke to the media owners in 3 or 4 cases. There were one case which we were unfairly blamed because the channel, this one guy, his viewership dropped. And there was only one case that came to me, and that was about Matiullah Jan. And when I found out that he had been picked up, the next day we had him released. But you cannot compare what is going on. I mean, there is just no comparison between then and now.
I would like to add, actually, Imran, thank you for answering to Dr. May, that since last 15 months, there are more than 40 cases, 40 individual cases registered against journalists. There are 40 members of journalists from Karachi, from Punjab, from Lahore, from Peshawar, and from Balochistan. And if you calculate only Balochistan, there are more. But I have a question, as Dr. May said about media, that the rape incident actually happened. If you remember, Dr. May, the rape incident on the motorway during Imran Khan's sparked international outrage. But you know, the Human Rights Commission in Pakistan took quite active measures to seek justice on the times. But when I look at now, in early February this year, a woman was assaulted in F9 Pakistan, but media discussions on that matter were completely banned by PAMRA, and our human rights bodies appeared to remain silent, like there was no peep. Just recently, yesterday, there was a news about another rape occurred in Markna Hills in Islamabad, and that actually raises concern about the potential compromises like our human rights institutions in Pakistan and media have made. Is there really are the human rights organizations and the media in Pakistan is completely compromised? Because what I heard, okay, Imran Khan's name or PTI leadership cannot be mentioned in TV, but other than that, can all these crimes is also banned? And why actually human rights organizations are silent? Why there is no beat against those things?
Well, look, Safina, look. Unfortunately, the media, and I'm talking about our own media, and then I'm talking about the Western countries, 2 different things. Our own media is unfortunately controlled by the media owners, the bosses. And the media bosses have huge business interests. I mean, they're interested not just running a media house, they have other business interests. And so for those other business interests, which actually is what brings them most of their money, they are willing to compromise on the freedom of media if those business interests are threatened. We never did that. In our time, the media, if you look at the media, majority of the coverage was against PTI, my government. I mean, we had a real problem with the media. In fact, the problem was that there was real libelous stuff on the media. And even I, as a Prime Minister, I had to go to court. And yet, in my 3 years, I never got justice. Whereas in Britain, I've been in a libel case, a very famous one, and within 1.5 years, the case was decided. So anyway, I couldn't get justice, and we felt there was a lot of reporting, a lot of fake news, and we tried to bring legislation to control fake news, by the way, which is a problem all over the world because social media is a new phenomena. But unfortunately, I found that the media then and the human rights organizations, were very vocal at the time. But now, with a complete clampdown on human rights, I'm afraid there's not much, hardly any response from them. But about the Western countries, I find that, they talk about human rights when it suits their interests. But right now, I mean, all the talk about democracy, human rights, and so on, it's only reserved for, China and Russia, when something happens in Hong Kong or Uyghurs or something to do with the Russian dissidents. But what is happening right now, there's hardly any condemnation from any of the powerful Western countries who claim, that they are the, their professed aims are promoting democracy and human rights.
Yeah, that actually surprises me a lot. Thank you, Imran.
Chairman, this is Atif. First of all, thank you very much for accepting my request and joining us at Twitter Space today. I'm really grateful to Jeremy and Safina for organizing this event, as well as our social media team headed by Gibran Ilyas, Imran, Hamid, because without our social media, all this, our political movement, our struggle, all these events couldn't have been possible. And then, a friend like Dr. Mohit Pirzada, a mentor, who has always been our biggest support, especially during the last 30 months. I don't have any question, it's just I want to bring it to your notice. Alhamdulillah, we have support among 98% of Pakistani Americans. And along with that, we've started getting huge support among the Muslim Americans as well. And on September 2nd, we are planning one of the biggest events on which you'll be speaking to among over 15,000 Muslim American gathering. And also, I want to make a commitment, like you always say, La ilaha illallah. And inshallah, we will fight till the very end. We will not leave you alone. All the overseas Pakistanis are with you. And after that, Gibran Ilyas, I think he's also at the airport and he's about to check in. He also wants to make an announcement. Gibran bhai, if you can unmute yourself and make that announcement, because it's a very important announcement. Thank you.
Sure. Many thanks, Adeel. Concept, you had said that it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. So what we have done in social media is, we've heard of citizens journalism, but what we have done is this is going to be the first ever citizens documentary. I think it's going to be one of the biggest. So what we're asking people who have footages in high definition from March 2022, when the whole movement started for Hakiki Azadi, just check my pinned tweet. Feedback@insaf.pk is the email address to email if you want to be part of that project. Inshallah, it will be one of the greatest documentaries ever, because everybody will be part of it. Kansab, my short question is, you once mentioned that PMLN, they're not educated, nor they try to get education. So just recently, Khwaja Asif has blamed, put allegations on Shaukat Khanum Hospital again. I say we let them, because every time he does that, we get record donations. So this is what we're seeing this time around. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, look, Gibran, these people are discredited. They have been in power for 30 years. Everyone knows everything about them. And the last 14 months, they have completely destroyed themselves, because they came in on the pretext that they were experienced in dealing with the economy. And they have completely, our economy has never been in a worse shape than it is right now. And this is, despite what was called the commodity super cycle, when post-COVID, the international commodity prices had gone through the roof, which is when we were in power. And now they are down by 35%. And despite that, you find that inflation is unprecedented in Pakistan's history. So number one was inflation, number two was fixing the economy. The economy has nosedived in Pakistan. We almost defaulted on our loans, and that would have really set the country back. So people now, the reason why they are scared of holding elections, and the reason why they only want elections, is when they know that PTI is completely hamstrung by the establishment, and I'm in jail or disqualified, because they're petrified that in the elections they'll be wiped out. My point is that whatever happens, they'll be wiped out in election. Even if I'm in jail or if I'm disqualified, I don't think the moment the elections start, they do not understand the passion on the ground right now. The feeling of injustice amongst the people, what is happening, whether it is economic injustice and whether it is mishandling of the economy or the governance system and the levels of corruption. So they will be wiped out whenever there are elections. But the point is that people like Khwaja Asif, no one listens to him, because these people are supporting, they have supported the most corrupt governments. I mean, the two Asif Zardari was considered the most corrupt man by people like Khwaja Asif and Nawaz Sharif. Now they're all together. And Zardari used to call Nawaz Sharif the most corrupt person. So they're all together now. So anyway, they have no credibility. And that's reflected in them trying to run away from the elections.
This is Jeremy again. I wanted to ask you, there seems to be an effort by the media to portray you as, somehow anti-American. I know that one of your generals paid $30,000 to lobby the U.S. to support your removal as prime minister. Would you be willing to map that amount if I convince the CIA to put you back into power?
Well, Jeremy, yes, amazingly, my own army chief at the time had hired this lobbyist without us knowing, and my own government was paying him $30,000 while he was lobbying against me to the Americans and telling them that I was anti-American. But I just a word about what is this idea about anti-American. I mean, how can you be anti-whole country? This idea of calling someone anti-American or anti-Pakistani or anti-Indian, for instance. How could I be anti-Indian? I would be anti the policies of Narendra Modi, specifically the way they are treating the minorities or the people of Kashmir. But I can't be anti-whole country, because a country is made up of all sorts of opinions. So I was always against the policy of Pakistan joining the US war on terror, because as a Pakistani I felt it would be a disaster for Pakistan, and it was. 80,000 Pakistanis were killed in it. Over $100 billion lost to a poor economy. And I was always skeptical about the US war in Afghanistan or US invasion of Afghanistan, because there were no clear aims, and I kept saying there would never be a military solution. So if you criticize the US foreign policy, does not make you anti-American. I mean, if I'm today criticizing my own government for this fascist tendencies, I mean the draconian laws, the total violation of our fundamental rights, does that make me anti-Pakistani? So this is, it's to brand people. Sometimes I feel that, to stop criticism of certain policy, and especially when you're from other countries, it's easy to brand you as being anti-American and then shut your voice.
But I would like to add in there, Imran, that you have stayed in UK since you were 17 years old, and you always say that you loved being here and their rule of law. That's how actually you got inspired by. So I would like you to add into this that why would you be anti-West when actually you have been praising them and you have stayed there about nearly 20 years?
Look, how can you be anti-West? West is a geography. I mean, it has so many countries. These are so bizarre, these terms. He's anti-West or he's anti-American and so on. Look, I mean, Britain, I keep telling everyone that the first time I saw two important things which made the basis of my manifesto was rule of law and a welfare state. So that's the first time I saw in Britain. And later on, when I studied my own history and especially Islamic history, I discovered that the state of Medina was based on these two great concepts of humanity, justice and humanity, and a welfare state, and all the great concepts which I saw in England were actually 1500 years ago was actually in the state of Medina, set up by our Prophet, peace be upon him. So, but I also understand the weaknesses of the Western society. I also know their strengths, same as I know the weakness of my society and the strength of my society. But that's how people, understand different communities. you don't sort of blanketly say you are anti one community or anti the other community. You just deal with them. A mature way is to their weaknesses and their strengths.
Thank you.
You know, as I was getting ready to, coming up with a list of questions that I was going to ask you, my neighbor bought a black pickup truck, and so it's sitting outside. I don't know if I should be worried or not that anyone is coming for me with a black ego or anything. But
Jeremy, you should be very worried, because if they come in, let me tell you what they'll do. First of all, if they find you, they're going to thrash you. And if they don't find you, they will pick up anyone who's in your house. They will take them, with them in the black Vigo. They will smash your house. They will rob it. I mean, this guy, one of my MPs, he was not in the house. They broke open his safe. And they, took away everything from the safe. So it's not just that they beat you up and they rob you, they break the house. In other words, they vandalize the house. They also rob it. So be careful.
Right. If I do need to flee, from what I understand, I can hide in Atabad, because they never look there, from what I understand.
Well, my senior leadership, they will give you plenty of hints, because they've been hiding for 2 months. They're all out of their homes. They're hiding.
Gotcha. I think Safina mentioned Pakistani Americans. Now, I have a pretty big fan base of Pakistani Americans, and in terms of the population of Pakistanis in the United States and the effect that they have in the United States, it's very outsized. We call it like punching above your weight. They're one of the most respected and influential groups. Meanwhile, I read that in the last year, 750,000 Pakistanis have left Pakistan, which is great news for us because we love Pakistanis here. They are our doctors and we're very involved in politics and industry. But I can't imagine this kind of brain drain being good for Pakistan.
Look, Jeremy, first, the Pakistani American community is one of the most powerful Pakistani expatriate community. And also it is one of my biggest support, PTI's biggest support does come from not just the Pakistani Americans, but basically amongst the 10 million Pakistanis that live abroad. And the main reason is because when they go abroad, like I went when I was a teenager, you see rule of law. And by rule of law, it means that if you pay your taxes and if you don't break the law, you are a free man. You're protected by the laws of the land. And whereas when they come, when you see what is happening in Pakistan, it would never happen that in the US, your house would be broken in by police in the middle of the night and people picked up, beaten up, the house robbed. It's unthinkable there. Because no police officer would dare to give instructions like that because his juniors won't obey them. Because it would be against the law of the department, the police department. They're not allowed to do this sort of thing. So the juniors would not accept this. And even if they did accept this order, they would be liable to be sued in a court of law and would suffer heavy damages. But here, unfortunately, might is right. And this is what takes away the freedom of human beings. And it actually creates a society where it completely shuts off the potential of a society. It destroys meritocracy. So it destroys this, only the potential of humans is in freedom. So throughout history of mankind, a human strives for freedom because only free societies, can ascend, can go to great heights. And freedom comes with the rule of law. Now, that's why the overseas Pakistanis back us, because they live in societies and understand what I mean by rule of law. Now, second, what the point is, actually, it's a very serious issue we are facing right now. People are losing hope in Pakistan. And why are they losing hope? Because the establishment is trying to impose on us these crooks and criminals who've been in power for 30 years, who are proven money launderers, who are proven to be corrupt, not just by what we say, but what they say about each other, what the establishment used to say about them. So when these people are imposed on a country, and then you see that the establishment is trying to not allow the biggest party to come into power, which means over 70% of people, the choice of over 70% of the people will not be allowed to compete in the elections. That's when they lose hope, because they look at these faces who they've been seeing for 30 years and they think they will be back again in power. That's why we have 1.2 million top professionals leaving the country in the last few months. This is the biggest brain drain in our history. And remember, not just that their skills are leaving our country, but also the capital. They will be taking the money out as well. It's the big disaster which is taking place in this country. And unfortunately, right now, the way the establishment is sitting with this government of crooks, this is the biggest, from my point of view, I mean, the cause of hopelessness. And it's because of hopelessness that you find people leaving the country.
So my question is about the status or the role of the army in all of this. People ask you lots of questions about the army, and from what I understand, the army is the most competent institution in Pakistan. So anything that needs to get done, whether it's COVID policy, which you were praised for, relies heavily on them. That's just how everything works. But a healthy country needs other institutions other than the army to be strong, to be intact, to be able to carry out the functions of a society. So how does a country transition to having stronger institutions other than the army? I mean, are there any other countries that have done this? What's your plan for this?
Well, look, Jeremy, we started off as a security state because in 1947 we got our independence, and the next year we had a conflict with India. Now from then onwards there was this fear in Pakistan that we have a neighbor 7 times the size of our country, and will we survive? So the dependence on the army grew, and over a period of time, not just dependence, but people sort of loved the army because you love an institution which will guarantee you your freedom and your protection. But subsequently the country had to evolve. You have to evolve as a country to have a proper democratic system. A proper democracy means genuine freedom, and that evolution process kept hitting snags because we would have military dictatorship, then we would have a democratic setup come in, and within a decade it would be wound out and the military would come back in again. So this happened 3 times. Now when it happened 3 times, the evolution of the democracy stalled. So while we would have been evolving as a democracy, unfortunately it stalled. Now in the last, how many years should I say, 15 years, our democracy was sort of moving forward. There was no interruption in our democratic process. And we were sort of struggling along on our way, and the democratic systems were getting stronger. And then comes this intervention by the army chief in April last year. Now, a government that had the best economic performance, and this is in the economic survey of Pakistan, you can see that all the economic indicators were positive. We were heading in the right direction, and suddenly he decides to pull the rug under the feet and brings back the same people. And so that's when, in the last 14 months, the country has just gone down the drain. All the worst economic indicators, but even worse, the hopelessness, seeing the same faces again, and seeing the establishment standing with them, and then trying to block the way of the biggest party in the country so that these crooks could again win the elections. That is what is causing hopelessness. And secondly, that means completely dismantling the democratic structure that had been evolving over a period of time. So we are right now back to square one. And this is why the coming elections, could be vital for our country's future. In my opinion, no matter whatever the establishment wants, I think that people will come out in such great numbers and they will vote against these criminals. And I think we will have a huge change. But other people are watching the grip of the establishment right now, and then the draconian measures right now. People are just losing hope, and they feel that there's no hope, and they're leaving the country.
Okay, Mr. Khan, that actually reminds me what happened in GB. As we are aware, none of the prime ministers in Pakistan has ever served a full 5-year term in last 75 years, despite having their party's majority of the seats. And also, we know that PTI government was overturned in both GB and Kashmir. And on the election day, July 7th, the GB parliament was sealed by the police, and even the assembly speaker was not allowed the entry. So considering all these hurdles, how we can expect that upcoming elections to be free and fair? If the PTI wins a majority of the seats, what does the future hold, given what has happened in GB recently, which you are aware? It is also worth looking at elections announced by the Supreme Court on May 4th were not held in both provinces. So what actually, given these challenges and previous incidents, how we can ensure free and fair elections if PTI wins the majority of the seat? What does the future hold based on what happened in GB, for us? That you were overturned after 3.5 years. So even if given these challenges, how will we make sure that free and fair elections will happen, and what will be the future of our democracy?
So, Jeremy, can I have just one question after this? Can you make this the last question? So I'll just answer this and then one question after this. Look, Safina, look. What happened in Gilgit-Baltistan and what happened in Azad Kashmir is a disaster for our democracy. Because what you saw was the manipulation by the establishment of pulling down a government. Now, if this keeps happening, the democratic process can never evolve. So you are always, beholden to a powerful establishment, which then decides to make or break governments. And the damage done to Pakistan, and I'm not talking about PTI, the damage done to Pakistan by what General Bajwa did by removing a running economy, a government that had gone out, had dealt with COVID, one of the best top 3 countries in the world, which dealt with the biggest crisis, humanity faced for almost a century, and then brought the economic performance, 6% growth rate, average last 2 years, to bring down that government and replace it with these cabal of crooks. And then they crash the economy and destroy the governance system. So who is going to pay for this? Who should be responsible for this? Will anyone ever be held responsible for doing this such tremendous damage to the country? I mean, the amount of damage done to the common people going below the poverty line, half our industry closed today, growth rate from 6% coming down to 0.3%. Which has consequences. When industry shuts down, it takes quite a while to again open up your industry or restart it. So this is what happens when someone makes decisions in a closed room without any debate and then not accountable to anyone, and he can then trot off anywhere while the country just goes down the drain. So, and I'm afraid in Gilgit-Baltistan, the tragedy is that Khalid Khurshid was one of the best chief ministers I've seen in Pakistan. He was outstanding. And to actually bring him down and his government, such a great disaster was done to people of Gilgit-Baltistan. I think it is sad what happened. I think it is not just bad for democracy, but for the people of the entire Gilgit-Baltistan province. So to conclude, let me just say, look, our democracy has to move forward. We have no choice but to have democracy. A bad democracy is better than a military dictatorship. This is a consensus amongst the people of Pakistan. So where do we go from here? The question you're asking is that what happens if there are no free and fair elections? Right now, no one thinks there are going to be free and fair elections because they're already planning to rig the elections. But my opinion, I'm an optimist. I feel that in this election, the level of public awareness in Pakistan is so much that I feel that you will have the greatest ever turnout in these elections. And no matter how hard they try to rig it, I'm a strong believer that the people in this country will defeat all methods of rigging which are being planned.
Inshallah, thank you so much, Imran Khan. I have one very, very fast question from my followers who all want to know that on the subject of biryani, do you like aloo or no aloo?
Well, you know, as you get older, your tastes change. So biryani was a great delicacy of mine some 40 years ago. But right now, you know, I'm afraid there are other delicacies that I enjoy most. But then, yes, biryani with aloo I like more.
With aloo, okay, thank you. And also, how do you, I mean, just day to day, how do you maintain, this is the last question, how do you maintain a sense of peace and hope during this time?
Well, you know, Jeremy, I have a very strong faith in God, which always keeps you going, because, you know, you try your best, and since I'm not doing this for myself, I'm doing this for my country. Why am I doing this for my country? Because I'm one of those privileged people who got so much love and respect from his country that it was important for me to try and do my best for them. And so I've tried to do my best for my people. And the rest I leave to the Almighty. Because, you know, it's success and failure are in His hands. Effort, struggle is in my hand. And I will be struggling to my last breath. But then how do I relax and stay calm and content at night? Because after doing my best, then I pray to the Almighty that, look, now it's up to you. You are the one who's going to decide whether I succeed or fail. So actually, that's how, you know, I go through all the tough times. And I have to say that these 12 months, and particularly the last 2 months, have been probably the toughest 2 months of my life.